All right, Carlos, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing, man?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me on today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, do you feel all mellow right now?
I do. I love just, even if it's not a guided meditation, just doing some conscious breathing, right? It's so simple and so profound and definitely feeling more just mellow.
Mm, I find it's like, with me, when I do those like kind of breathing exercises with guests, I find it's like you kind of tap into each other's, like, you just tap into each other a bit. You know what I mean? And what I notice is, especially something that is like important for me, is like it helps the silence be a bit less tense because I'm a busy mind person. My mind's always going at like a million miles an hour, as we talked about last time. And it's like, for me, it just helps me like just be at peace within silence. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. Agreed.
Big agreed. All right. So this is my big jumping off point, Carlos. So
Let's do it.
to any of my listeners or any listeners in general who don't know very much about sound healing, let's say they're a normal person, and I know normal doesn't mean anything. It's like, it doesn't mean anything. But to someone like that who isn't very aware of what sound healing is, what would be like the elevator pitch you'd give them to like pique their curiosity, pique their interest, maybe in an esoteric sense, maybe a practical sense? Feel free to go anywhere with that.
Absolutely. It's an interesting question because when you start learning how to do different sound healing modalities and techniques, one of the things that instructors always include in the curriculum is, how do you speak about sound healing to someone who doesn't know anything about it? Because it is in many ways a subject that isn't part of traditional daily conversations. Yet the things that we do speak on in daily conversation is helpful in understanding sound healing. So when we talk about, feeling the vibe from a person, or I got a good vibe from them. Did you get a good vibe from them? Or having someone that shows up in a group space and the vibe changes when someone walks into the room. So I feel that most people have had some experience in some way, shape, or form like that, where they can relate to the language and notion of a vibe. And so the elevator pitch approach answer would be that we are giant, enormous electrical beings. Every single particle within us emits and generates energy. And sometimes those energetic expressions are balanced. They're able to create a nice homeostasis or balance within the body. And sometimes they're not. And like an instrument that can go out of tune, it disrupts and distorts just what's capable of being produced. And so, in other words, our health and our vitality is directly related to our vibration. And sound healing helps to restore, balance, and support those different energetic patterns.
Yeah, I just gave you like 3 different jumping off points from it. That's really interesting. Because like there's like 2 main points I was thinking about. The first one is that, like you said, like, some people have like, you say like, oh, they have a good vibe. Like, that's my favorite thing to say. I say that about I'm like, that guy has a great vibe, terrible vibe, whatever. But it's like, we always say that. And I feel like a lot of the time when we say like somebody has a good vibe, we're saying it as if people are like static entities. Whereas like, I could be like, oh yeah, Carlos, he has a chill vibe, man. He's a dope dude. But if Carlos is pissed off and angry one day, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm guessing the vibe, the frequency you'd be giving off would be very different. So it's almost like
Absolutely.
People are in constant flux, constant change. And what a good vibe person is like the way I look at it. Like, a good vibe person is just someone who's in a good vibe, like over 50% of the time. Like, about 60 to 80% of the time when you're around them, you're like, oh yeah, that person's a good vibe. Right. So from your perspective, it's like, is that almost a pointless statement to say someone has a good vibe because it's always fluctuating?
It's a relative statement because it's always going to be situational, conditional, circumstantial, just like you've said. This brings, attention to that point that we're always in awareness in some way, shape, or form from the place that we're at in that moment as well. Because if I am not in a place that is of ease, then I'm more than likely going to notice other resonant patterns or things that match a state of unease or dis-ease. And so it's relative. It's based on perceptual programming and biases that I have within me and what qualifies something as being good vibe or not. And even over the years, I would say the language around that has shifted for me, where it's less about good and bad and more about how is that vibe in resonance with me. Because sometimes, depending on the flux, it may seem like there's more of an elevated type feel, and other times it may feel like there's a lower, just like still static, kind of feel. But it's always relative and always changing based on the observer and so many other factors as well.
Wow, that's really interesting. And then the second point, based on what you said earlier that I was thinking about, is you're saying how, like, with sound tuning or healing, I forget what you said, but essentially it was like you can not alter, but you can impact a vibrational state. Yeah. My question is, like, it's kind of is one of my like hypotheses that there are like no, within reason, there are no like good people and bad people. There's just people you vibe with, and based on what we're saying, a lot of the time. And there's people that we don't vibe with a lot of the time. Like, there's some people, it's like, my mom would be like, oh, you need to meet Johnny. He's the best. I meet Johnny, we don't get along. And then I'm like, that makes no sense. And is there something wrong with me? Is there something wrong with Johnny? Is there something wrong with my mom? Because this equation should be simple. It should be like, okay, right. My mom's awesome. Johnny is apparently awesome for my mom, but we don't get along. So this is a big question. But the first part is, do you think that every person has certain frequencies that we get along with and that we vibe with, and certain ones that for some reason we're just discordant with? And the second part of this, and feel free to jump into any of these, is if you're with someone who maybe you're discordant with through sound healing or tuning forks or anything like that, do you think you might actually be able to dissipate some of the discordant energy between people and almost have those people get more in sync than they normally would?
Yes, with the side of yes. And I have an example that I'll share in a little bit about that. But for the first part, so everything and everyone is energy, and everyone and everything is a collection of fields within fields within fields within fields of energy, of different types of electromagnetic, etheric, thermal, etc. And so each person in life represents a mirror and a window. They're helping us to see things through their lens, and they're helping to reflect back to us who we are not, what we vibe with, what we don't vibe with. And then we choose to respond from those vibrational interactions accordingly, based on what we say, what we think, what we do with that individual. Now, it's interesting to think about individuals that perhaps rub us the wrong way or that we don't vibe with or gel with. The reality is that most of the time, the individuals that trigger or activate those kinds of sensory feelings, responses within us, they're holding something for us to understand. They're helping to teach us something that we haven't gained clarity around yet. And so as a result, we are charged, we are triggered, we are ignited, we are activated in the presence of those individuals. And that leads me to just a very brief story about a client who was having a hard time with a coworker. And I said, let's look at the elemental story going on here. In other words, this is now shamanic concepts and principles, but it ties into sound because it's about resonance. It always is about resonance, resonance, resonance. So my client was having a challenge with another individual in his job who happened to be an earth element based on the year that he's born. And so I told my client, let's consider for a moment that this individual at work is in your life right now to help you take a closer look at your own relationship with your own earth. And so let's just for a moment do some work to rebalance your earth elements. Now, from a sound perspective, that involved a series of drumming techniques, and then using a singing bowl that was in a very lower key, in the key of C. And a week and a half later, when he came for a follow-up, he said, I never would have realized that this guy was there to help me be better with my own earth. And earth represents giving and receiving the things that nurture, nourish, and support you. And here was this guy, my client, who really struggled with receiving. He would give, but he was terrible at asking for help, and he would never receive. When he started working on that with himself, the guy at work was no longer like triggering or inflaming anything. It was just, he's like, he's different. I said, he's not different. You're different. So therefore, what you see is going to look different. Because when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
That is very interesting.
It was fascinating.
Now this might be out of your wheelhouse. I'm not sure how much you know about astrology, because you brought up elements, and I have a little background in astrology. I'd claim myself to be like an amateur astrologer. I have my level 1 certification. And obviously in astrology, like the 3 biggest aspects of someone's chart are your ascendant, your sun, and your moon, right? So when you say someone is like based on their year, they're an earth sign, I'm guessing you're speaking about their sun sign?
So the elemental example that I just gave is based on a West African tradition of shamanism called Dagara medicine, Dagara. And this is from a tribe that's in the area of Burkina Faso in Africa, just east of Ghana. And this tribe has taught the Western world a lot of their indigenous practices and views. And that's based on a 5 elemental system where there's earth, water, fire, nature, and mineral. And each of those 5 elements makes up the world we live in and the world we are. And sometimes one or more of those elements are out of alignment and are the root cause of what we experience as suffering in this life. So it's really less about the constellation components and more about this elemental balance based on the year that a person was born. So when someone's born in a year that ends in 0 or 5, that constitutes them as being part of the earth element.
All right, I'm earth.
So you would be my earth brother.
Yeah.
If someone was born in 1 or 6, that's water. 2 or 7 is fire. So I'm 7. So I'm fire element. 3 or 8 is nature. 4 or 9 is mineral. And this is just something that we could easily spend days exploring. But for the sake of this conversation, it's just another way to help people be more in alignment with their vibe once they understand that elemental story and how it portrays in life, either in a healthy, functional way or in an unhealthy, dysfunctional way. And I like using sound to then bring balance to the elements.
That's very cool. Now, so I'm earth, you're fire. From your perspective, what do you think being fire says or about you based on your life, your experiences? What has that statement meant to you, being a fire person? And then for me, do you have any estimations on what you would notice about maybe or guess about me being earth?
Sure. So this is one of those moments to bring attention to the truth that we are all of the elements all of the time. And so from a cosmological standpoint, the year that you're born, while it does indicate then your primary elemental foundation, so yours is earth, mine is fire, we are always in synchronicities with all the other elements. So in some situations, so for example, though my primary element is fire, I tend to have a very earthy fire component to me. It's on the gentler side. It's a little bit more about steady eddy, nurture, nourish, and support, which are earth qualities. Fire can have that ignition, that shape shifting, that quick movement, the ignition, the spark, the connection to dreams, visions, and passions. And so up until I learned about this shamanic tradition, I would look at fire as something that was exclusively a positive thing. I have a lot of fire. This person's got a lot of fire in them. Now I realize that there's both a healthy and an unhealthy expression of fire. For example, when fire is just go, 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 do, 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 we burn up, we burn out, we consume, we combust, and we deplete, and ultimately reach considerable fatigue. Whereas fire in alignment has more of a sustainability component to it. It has less peaks and valleys and more of like a sinus rhythm to help that fire burn in a way that provides more sustainability, in a way that soothes versus burns up and burns out. So now I have a different understanding of fire. And if anything, the more appropriate question is, how is your fire burning in relationship with, and then pick the area of a person's life, and they can easily see, am I on fire? Is there no fire? Is it extinguished? No motivation, no desire, no dreams, no visions, no passions. Just a very monotonous routine type of life that's fire out of alignment. And from an earth standpoint, since you asked about that, typically what I ask people to find out more about their earth relationship. So that if I don't know their year of birth, I would simply ask, tell me a little bit about your relationship with giving and receiving in life. If it were a seesaw, how much giving is happening in relationship to receiving? Is there balance? Is there maybe too much giving, not enough receiving? Is there zero giving and only receiving? And just, explore that question, because that question then tells us a lot about relationship to having your basic needs met, feeling supported, feeling safe, feeling secure, how you value yourself. I mean, these are all earth components. So yeah, it's pretty powerful.
That's really interesting. And there's so many modalities. There's astrology. There's there's numerology. There's what we're talking about. What Daguerre? Daguerre.
Mm-hmm.
Daguerre. And there's just so many different modalities and teachings around the world. Exactly. And this is what I've noticed is based on what you just said, the Daguerre, and then astrologically, so in Daguerre, I'm Earth. And then astrologically, I'm Libra. I'm an air sign. Then I have my moon in Virgo, and my ascendant is Aquarius.
Mm-hmm.
So it's from your perspective, how do all of these interact? Because on some level, don't they seem to contradict each other in some way? I don't know.
It's more about how it moves the state of energy, because it's all part of this one wheel. Where all these elements are connected. And so ultimately, what I've come to find, because I don't have training and background in astrology, whether it's Vedic astrology or other forms, I recognize that every observer has their language of how they observe. And so while we live in a world that has countless truths, there's ultimately a universal truth, which is not bound by geography, by society, by when it was birthed, by who brought it forth. And what I've come to see is that when you see the points, so all the things that you just mentioned of the different houses, the sun, the moon, and so forth, it would be interesting to look and see what is the universal pattern that exists between this system of how it explains, between this system of how it explains, and what is the common thread there. Most of the time, there is a common thread component. And so I like when clients come to see me and they bring their charts and they have, notes on a reading they had, and I learn along the way. And then I always just nod and shake my head and say, okay. And so this is what I know. This is what I can share. How does that resonate with you? And that's always my ending question when I deliver something is, how does that resonate with you? How's that sitting with you? Is it triggering anything? Does it feel like it's in alignment, or does it feel like it's not making contact and so forth? So yeah, you have to really notice and see, I believe, deeply. You have to really notice and see what's in alignment with you and your truth, because there is a universal truth that threads a lot of those things together in a non-contradictory way.
Yeah, pretty much the epiphany I had when you were just speaking is like, they're all saying, like, is this exactly what you just said? They're all saying the truth of you in different languages. Mm-hmm. So it's like, and then even if you want to go even more woo woo about it, it's like, as you go into like higher states and stuff, you end up being everyone is everyone anyway. And there's really no such thing as astrology and anything. Everything is just consciousness. But down here, it's like, to really understand it, it's like, okay, I want to understand who Anton Czachor is. All right. My first thing I come across in my life, and I'm literally speaking about myself right now, is astrology. Like that was like the first window to like esoteric topics, to understanding who I was. And I dived deep into astrology. And I just scoured my chart. That's when I started learning about everything. And I was like, okay, this tells me in some sense partially who I am. This is like, you know, it has a pretty good grasp on aspects of my core personality. And then I might get into numerology, and then it tells me the same thing, but through its lens. And then I get into the Dagara tradition, and then it tells me the exact same thing. And it's like anybody could come to understand who they are, or partially who they are, from going to any of these modalities in different orders. It's like some person might never learn about astrology their entire life, but they grew up with the Dagara system, and then they got the exact same statement they would have got if they were in astrology anyway. So it's almost like, you know, I was talking to Vicky, another one of Katerina's friends, and we were talking about how like there's so many different styles of consciousness. There's so many styles of leadership. There's so many styles of people. There's so many styles of human beings that not everything works. It's like somebody just for some reason astrology just never clicks. They're just not passionate. They're not curious about it. Other people, the moment you talked about that Dagara thing, they lit up. They're like, oh, that's my lane. And I feel like that is like when I really follow my heart, when I don't think about things, but I feel things. It's like certain words people say, certain ideas they expound is like, it's just like, I just go ding, ding, ding. And the next thing you know, I've spent the next 5 years of my life going down that path. And so I guess all I'm really saying in all of this is that it just seems to me that like the universe has these universal truths, and it's created such a plethora of different archetypes and human beings. And to actually be able to interact with all those human beings in different ways, it needs to create all of these different structures that different kinds of its creations will be drawn to. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm in agreement. And I also believe that because it's about resonance, there's going to be things that match with more completeness, with more amplification. And, you know, you have to really come to know what that is for you and how that shows up. I'm very open. I'm always curious to learn. And I've had many experiences in my life to see what a certain tradition had to teach and share, and certain things resonated at different levels. They all had their own level, and for me, the Dagara tradition felt like such simplicity, and like I'd already known it my whole life. It had this familiarity to it, Anton, and the things that I was noticing was I'm learning this much more quickly than I think others, or I'm able to retain something or explain it with a certain depth that I don't really have any lifetime experience basis for. Where's that coming from? And I would say that, where's that coming from? And for me, it really feels like I'm stepped back into something I might have already done before in this world at some other place and time in some other dimension, because it just is. It feels like I've known it my whole life. And it's only been 6 years.
Yeah, that's very cool. And I'm the same way. I feel like I wanted to be a teacher when I was growing up. That was like my first kind of thing I was drawn to. And I think the biggest part of that was I just wanted to help kids find their path. Like that was always my thing. Cause like I had a really difficult upbringing in high school. Like I was, it wasn't very fun. And it's like definitely grade 9 and grade 10 were extremely difficult for me. Like at that time of my life, aimlessness, confusion, not knowing who I was, what I want to do with my life. And, I think, going through difficult times makes you more empathetic, obviously. And I think that because of all of my difficulties going through those times, I wanted to help other people kind of find their path, I wanted to teach grade 9. Like that's the age I wanted to teach. And that's something I've thought a lot about, is everything you just said, is this idea of like, there's certain things that like we're all drawn to. And when we start them, we learn faster than almost anything else. We retain more information. Like I would say, out of everything in life, the things that I am like at my most natural with would be probably psychology. So psychology and philosophy, those are just two subjects. Like it's like philosophy. Yeah. But I feel like a lot of people can kind of they can kind of get in that. So psychology is like, I'll just kind of have weird, like I would do this in university. I would write papers without doing any research. And then I would like prove what I was saying after. Like I'd write a whole thesis on something, and then they'd be like, "You need 20 citations." I'd be like, "Okay, I'm gonna find."
I'm on it. Here I go.
Yeah, that pretty much. And then I just like literally find 20 things that agree with me. And it's probably not the best way to do it, but I was even honest with some of my professors. I was like, ones I had a good relationship with, I'd be like, "All right, Sonia, like." This is my perspective on this from your literature. Does this make sense? They'd be like, "Oh yeah. How do you know that?" And I'm just like, I just kind of know it. I don't know. I feel like that's just how human beings work. And they're like, "Yeah, I did my like 4th year thesis on that. It took me like 7 months to figure out. And for me, it's just a fleeting idea I have." And obviously that can come across as arrogant, but the reason why I don't think it's arrogant is I think we all have our versions of that. I think like, it's like, yeah, sure, that's my genius, but everybody has their thing. Some people, it's like they pick up a football and they know how to throw it, or they know how to catch it. And like, they're just everyone has these weird gifts. And with you, what brought you to sound healing, and why do you think it clicks?
So it's one of these full circle type of situations and stories, because music had been a tremendous part of my life since early childhood, starting to take piano lessons at an early age at like 6. And then by the time I was in between 3rd and 4th grade, I was doing the music ministry at our church. So I was playing the organ, playing the piano, and there was just this sense of how you could help bring a sense of comfort to people, like in a congregation, with certain songs you'd play or the way you played it. And it would help people feel a sense of connection, a sense of comfort, a sense of serenity, which is, I didn't know this at the time, but I must have known it, that's something you should be able to get out of a church experience. And so when it came time to decide what to study after high school, there's that familial story that, you'll never get far if you major in music. And so what's something else you can choose to do in life as a profession? And so through their lens, it was always healthcare, doctor, wellness. So I went to chiropractic school and became a chiropractor. But it wasn't until like the 7th year of being in practice where something started to change. And I started to tune into or feel certain things in a way that changed my practice. And that led me to meet a massage therapist who was using a sound table, tuning forks, and singing bowls in her practice. And I walked in her room. I'm like, what's all this? And so she did a session on me. I got to experience a frequency table. It's called a vibroacoustic therapy table. It's like a massage table that has specialized subwoofers underneath it to play very low grade frequencies. She used tuning forks, singing bowls, and I just remember feeling such a deep relaxation and total silence for like days after. And I thought, I need to learn this. So through her guidance, I started signing up for some classes, getting some different instruments. And so fast forward, that was like 2011. 11 years later, now it's become the more predominant way that I help people. Like I still use my hands, but the chiropractic that I'm offering is less about the joints and the spine and the muscles and more about the whole body, the whole being.
So yeah. What is, how do you say it, chiropractic? What is it to be a chiropractor for you? What does that statement mean?
So in the beginning, it was basically someone who would help you with physical pain by helping to rebalance the structure of the body to help improve function. Now, for me, what it means is someone who gets to just be present with another individual for 45 minutes to an hour, someone who gets to witness and see someone in all of their perfect imperfections, and someone who can then reflect back to that person something that they probably have forgotten in life and how to reconnect with that essence of who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose? And so it embodies aspects of like teacher, shamanic, like healer, leader, and advocate and cheerleader. And really it's not having it be so cookie cutter or, assembly line, but dynamic, organic, and going with the flow to see how can I best serve this person while they're here on this earth.
Yeah, it's to me, and I don't mean to like put you in a box or anything, but it sounds to me like you've went from being a chiropractor to almost being like a healer, like a psychologist in like the best sense of the word, not the cookie cutter way it's done, but like a true like coach or psychiatrist or psychologist, whatever. It seems like nothing you really said, based on my understanding, even seems like it really is about being a chiropractor anymore.
Right. Or I'll say the following, because 2019, I took a continuing education class that I needed for maintaining my chiropractic license. And this teacher, really long story short, spent the purpose of the workshop was to learn about frequency healing to support the spine with an adjustment. Wow. So this guy had developed this instrument that basically released a very specific pulse that you would place on the spine, and that pulse would help reset a lot of the tone of the nerves, the reflex of the nerves, the tone of muscles. And it spoke to me so much because it was all about frequencies. And so when he elaborated further, he talked about how the origins of chiropractic, which, by the way, this is not something I had really learned a lot in school, that was mostly frequency based.
Really?
And the father of chiropractic, D.D. Palmer, was recognizing that the body had this tonal model of function, that it wasn't static the way most people believe it to be. Because static implies that it's just a collection of things, there's no connection, that everything is just individualized and differentiated. The tonal model sees that it's all one, and there can be distortions in the way all of the frequencies come together. And through an adjustment, you can help support the neurological frequencies and the tones that are affected by the nervous system. So it almost fired me up to be a chiropractor again, because it was like, I really am doing who I am and what I believe in. It just doesn't look the way the traditional model of chiropractic looks like, with, snap and crack and things like that.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. What it makes me think about is that it's like we're always just trying to get an outcome, right? We're trying to get the outcome of health. We're trying to get the outcome of physical health, mental health, emotional health, spiritual health. And what our society has done, what Western culture has done, is it said, okay, the way you get mental health is called psychology. And you talk about your problems for half an hour every day for 10 years, and then you get better. And then the way you develop physical health is chiropractor and physiotherapy. And you move ligaments, you move muscles, you get back to physical health. And I even fell into that a bit when I asked my first question, because I was like, it doesn't sound like you're actually being a chiropractor anymore. It sounds like you're being a psychologist. I was still kind of trapped in that model. But what you just said is really, it's like, okay, if I get the outcome, that is the outcome. Doesn't matter how I do it and what we call it. Right. If it's just sound and sonics, as long as you feel better when you leave and you have sustainable outcomes and you're healthier, it's kind of stupid to try to put that in too much of a box anyway. You know what I mean?
My teacher would always say that when we define it, we potentially confine it and restrict it. And so I don't often call myself a chiropractor. I don't give myself a title. I'm Carlos. When you come in here, I'm Carlos. The letters after my name are on the wall just to have something hanging on the wall. And so, for example, if someone comes in assuming they're going to receive a chiropractic visit and their neck is giving them trouble, I'll assess their neck. I'll see what's going on with the joints, with the muscles, tendons, and ligaments. And then I'll explain to them what are the energetic, mental, and emotional components that can present with neck pain, because our issues are in our tissues. And there's a very specific organization of how these issues reside in our tissues. And once we're having a session, I let them know that neck issues are tied into communicative and expressive imbalances. Sometimes it means we don't say what we mean.
Wow.
Sometimes it means we're mean when we say things. Sometimes it means that we're not speaking from a place that's truly authentic. We're saying what someone else wants to hear versus what's our true authentic feeling. And other times it means we don't say anything. We bite our tongue. In other words, we congest and suppress a natural flow of energy from this region of the neck and the throat. And depending on the side of the body, it can be related more to masculine energy or feminine energy. And so all I do is just follow the anatomy and then tell them the mental and emotional pieces that are associated with that based on current mapping systems. And how does that resonate with you? And it's always interesting to see the person kind of think, how did they know that about me? I said, I just followed the anatomy. And so that's chiropractic, but it opens up doorways now to more of the metaphysical pieces, so that in addition to chiropractic or physical-based techniques, treatments, or recommendations, they can do a ritual to help with their nature, because that's going to help them show up more authentically. That's going to help them take their mask off. That's going to help them be more in their power to be able to speak their truth. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Oh, for absolutely. Keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. So ultimately it's this infusion of different thoughts, ideas, and techniques that are still bringing us to a place where we can hopefully achieve more ease, in this case, in that person's neck, and simultaneously in their communicative and expressive health and so forth. So yeah, it becomes an interesting way to work with someone and not have it be so pinpoint. This is the one thing. It's like, let's create an environment where things can feel better.
Yeah, you probably asked, does that make sense? Because when you were speaking, my mouth was like open and I was like leaning to the side. It's because like you were speaking, I was like, dude, I always get like neck tension and upper like trap tension. And I always assumed it was because my head's really big. Like I objectively have a really big head, and that's probably part of it. But like also I notice whenever I do podcasts, my head always goes like this to one side. It always like, I don't know why. But it maybe it's the way I'm sitting, or maybe it's something deeper. But like I always end up, when I see myself, I have a slight, like it's always kind of like that. It's like, maybe it's the way I listen. I don't know. Does anything pop up when you say that?
So first of all, I just want to say that because we're physical beings, we're always going to look at the physical cause of why we are the way we are. And I'm not going to try to argue against that. Let's recognize that hey, there may be a postural component. There may be a head thing component, whatever. And let's notice, if we were to take inventory, and certainly not putting you on the spot right now.
Put me on the spot, man. Go ahead.
But rather, let's just notice if it's more right-sided or left-sided, then we could then ask questions like, for right-sided predominant issues, regardless of hand dominance, we would just ask, when it comes to your interaction with other male energy in life, how would you describe the communicative and expressive health? When you speak to them, how is what you say being received? Is it validated? Is it responded to in a way that feels like you're being heard, like your voice matters? Or does it fall on deaf ears? Is it received with an argumentative, comment and a criticism? And so these are ways to now look more closely and double click on communication expression with masculine energy. And so we just run the audit. Let's think of the top 3 male relationships. How is it speaking with them? How is it when they speak to you? Does it feel balanced? Does it feel like they do all the talking? Does it feel like you do all the talking? Et cetera, et cetera. And so this now becomes a way to just more closely, study and really just journey with that part of you for the purpose of bringing more alignment or balance into that mental and emotional aspect of what constitutes your neck.
Thank you. And so we have 15 minutes, and I have one other question I really wanted to get to, but how long will the singing bowls that usually take?
We can just do like a very brief, like 3 minute, 4 minute. It's less is more. It's been the theme for the last 2 days for me. Less is more. So,
let's do it. All right. Less is more.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So this is a curiosity for me because I'm a music buff, and I've told you before, I listen to everything. I listen from everything from pop to like melodic death metal. So I like it all. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the different vibrational impacts of different kinds of music on human beings?
So there was a book that someone gave me back in like 2011 when I was starting to learn about all this. And it had nothing to do with sound healing. It had to do with more about the science behind how water molecules can change a little bit of their structure and orientation based on the environment that they're in.
Miyamoto.
So it's Matsuru Emoto's Hidden Messages in Water. And there's sections in that book that would talk about the impact of different types of music as it relates to the energetic framework of those molecules and so forth. And so I could see how when I first read that, my thought was, well, I guess I shouldn't listen to Dream Theater or Metallica.
Yeah, exactly, dude.
And then as I read another book shortly after that, this teacher, Eileen McCusick, who's the one who developed biofield tuning.
Was it on plants?
No. Well, the hidden messages in water were water molecules that were frozen, but then biofield tuning was not necessarily about the effects on plants, but rather this notion that there's resonance and that there's different matching between frequencies. And so truth be told, every frequency that exists, and if we want to make it about music, let's make it about music right now. Any category of music or every category of music that exists produces a subset of frequencies are contained a lot in those types of songs. And the response that those frequencies generate, trigger, or activate in others is totally subjective. It's not really a fixed, rigid effect and experience. And so it's brought more question to what is the role of intention? What is the role of like other resonant frequencies that are contributing? Because it's not so one-to-one. The arguments that have been made is that music such as like loud heavy metal or things that are strong or intense create distortion in the physical body, overstimulation. Basically, they don't have benefits. It's more consequence than benefit. Yet you can find individuals that when they are in that exchange with that sound energy, it elicits and triggers completely different effects on them. It can actually help them feel more focused. It can help them feel more connected. It can help them feel and release an emotion that had just been held and held and held, which an hour of classical music may not have necessarily influenced them in enough a way to release. So this is where I always tell people intention is everything when it relates to sound interactions, music interactions. What's your intention? Can you choose to set an intention where listening to, and then fill in the blanks, will align with what I need in this moment? Because one of the first things I'll choose to listen to is going to be Dream Theater and tracks from prog rock bands and so forth, because it helps me feel a different sense of joy.
Yeah.
And this is for me, medicine that I take with intention. When I listen to a song, it's a focused intention to allow myself to really resonate with a certain frequency that I know will help me in that moment. I'm pretty in tune with what I need. But for someone who's not, it can be an open-ended question, Anton, like, how can listening to the song help me feel more connected right now in my life? And then off you go and see how different that song will then sound. Because it will.
Yeah, man. Because this was like, I heard about the, is it Miyamoto or Maimoto?
Matsuru Emoto.
Okay. So, because I heard about that years ago, and I've always been a metalhead. Like, I've always loved metal. And I never knew why, because I was always a happy-go-lucky person. And I was like, man, I just love, like, I like the screaming stuff too. Like, I love all of it, but like, I don't mind screaming stuff. And like, when I'm working out, I listen to it. I still listen to it all the time. And like, I always noticed that. And some person said, it's like, some people that are drawn to like screaming music and really heavy metal is like, there's an energetic imbalance in them when they're not able to understand and accept their own anger. And for me, I was incredibly repressed in my anger growing up. Like, I had a overbearing father figure who did, like, so I was extremely imbalanced on my masculine side. I was very feminine because I was very close to my mom. And what I think, and I don't know this, but my hypothesis is that metal gave me an outlet to my own internal aggression as a safe way to kind of channel that. And the reason why I bring this up is, like, I literally have a regimen I do when I want to change my emotional state. Like, let's say I get pissed off, I get in a fight with somebody and I'm livid and I want to fucking punch a hole through the wall. What I'll do is I'll throw on like Parkway Drive, like super heavy shit. And I'll go for a walk. I'll listen to an hour of just Parkway Drive. It's just screaming and it's just it's so therapeutic. And it's like, what happens is I start like, I'll scream to it out loud. Like, I'll just go through it. And then what I notice is after about an hour, there's a shift in me. And then it says, okay, put on something a bit chiller rock. I don't know, maybe Dream Theater or something. I'll throw on something chiller, still with an edge though, like still with an edge. I'll throw on Dream Theater for half an hour. And then it'll be like, okay, now it's time for Sarah McLachlan. And then I'll throw on like Sarah McLachlan. And after about 2 hours or 2.5 hours, it's this really interesting journey of like death metal to Sarah McLachlan. And it's this very thing I do on purpose. And because I tried, if I'm pissed, I can't listen to Sarah McLachlan. My head's going too fast. I'm just like, now I want to punch Sarah McLachlan in the face. And I'm like, I love you, Sarah. I don't want to punch you in the face. But like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the thing is like, I've just noticed that for me, man, if someone's like, yeah, you can't listen to metal anymore because it's a bad vibration. I'm like, dude, I feel like my life would be like missing, because I love metal. I love it. It's so experimental. It's so fascinating. It's like a fantasy movie. It's like Wheel of Time or Lord of the Rings. It's like you go into a world that, at Dream Theater, you have like orchestras and incredible guitar solos and incredible opera singers. Like I listen to like Nightwish or Evanescence or Within Temptation and stuff. And it's like, I'm like, man, if you tell me I can't listen to that anymore, I'm like, dude, life just lost half its meaning to me. You know what I mean?
I think we need to really, like, as a society, move away from this notion of really seeing things from a lens of good and bad exclusively. For me, it's more about how does that align with your earth, Anton? So how does the thought you're having right now, how are the words you speak right now, how are the choices you make helping to nurture, nourish, and support you and your path and your purpose with passion in a way that's sustainable? Like if you bring attention and intention to a question like that, then it's less about good and bad. And it becomes more about this centralized like alignment of what's needed in that moment, which can change from one moment to the next.
Beautiful, man. All right. Is it time for singing bowls?
Sure. You know what? I was listening and checking out some different sounds, and there was something that actually I think comes across a little clearer through this type of recording. So we're going to do a little audible, and in lieu of a singing bowl, it's going to be a wooden chime at first, and then I'll tap on the singing bowl. But I'll just take just a moment. This won't go too long, but this will be a chance for listeners to hopefully feel a little bit more ease. So wherever you are, however you're listening right now, hopefully not driving, you can take a moment to just be where you're at. And let's just start by taking a nice, slow, deep breath in. And let it all out. And find the rhythm. Find the rate that feels most comfortable for you. Maybe it takes you 4 to 5 seconds to breathe in. And another 4 to 5 to breathe out. And just feel what it's like to breathe in. Notice what moves. Notice how the chest or belly expand. And then notice what it feels like to exhale. And just take a second to ask yourself, in this moment, right here and now, what am I grateful for? And let your mind connect to that thought of gratitude and deep appreciation while continuing to breathe at a nice slow rate and rhythm. And just let yourself be like that for another moment or two. Visualizing in your mind's eye what you are grateful for and letting your body feel it as best it can. And on one of your next breath cycles, go ahead and let yourself take a deep breath in. Hold it at the top of the inhale for a 2 count. And at the end of that 2 count, release the breath fully. And let yourself one more time take a nice deep breath in, holding it at the top of the inhale for a 2-second hold. And then slowly release that breath, letting your awareness come back fully into the here and now. And when you're ready to open your eyes, you can.
Thanks, man.
You're welcome, Anton. Thank you.
I love the singing bowl, man. The crystal bowl. That it always has like the most otherworldly effect on me.
They are like something else. They really are. Mm-hmm.
That piercing note it's just at such a frequency. It's just like, yeah, it almost feels like the sound of electricity in some way, like not the crackling kind of electricity, but like the firm, non-stop, just constant oscillation frequency kind of, you know?
It's similar to how like a physicist would describe like a scalar wave that has this torsional quality to it, rotational, spherical, circular. Yeah, no beginning, no end. Just like us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, Carlos. So now it's a shameless plug time. So is there anything you're working on? Is there anything that you'd like to tell people about and where to find you?
The good news is I've done a lot of work around my shame and my blame and my guilt. So there is no shame. If anything, it's how can I feel joy and excitement to share with others, who I am and what I do. So I'm actually working with some different helpers to get YouTube as a stronger presence and expansion of the content that's there. Been starting to create more ambient music composition as well as guided meditation and chanting meditation. So my YouTube channel is called Harmonize Your Vibes. And so if you just go to harmonizeyourvibes.com, it'll direct you right to the YouTube channel. And I'd love to hear what you think and find out what you want to hear more of so I can create those things.
Beautiful. And do you have 5 more minutes, or do you have to get going in 1 minute?
Absolutely. I have 5 more minutes.
Okay. Because you just another question popped in my head.
Sure.
So someone who's trying to make healing music and putting it on YouTube, obviously YouTube, it has a really big compression and it really distorts, not in a noticeable way, but it does technically distort sound. What is your thoughts on kind of being in your field and trying to utilize YouTube?
So let me say, first, when I was initially thinking about doing all of this, my headspace was totally in that of like music production, the sound engineering component. And I had convinced myself that there's just no way you can translate and get it to come across through these platforms as if it was like in person or an analog, things like that. And so then for kicks, I took my cell phone with no external mic, no little shotgun mic, and just using a basic recording app with just raw, completely raw. And I shared it and I sent it with someone and said, let me know what you think. And what do you notice? What do you feel? And they had a very intense experience. So then I thought, let me explore this with group. So on Zoom, which has its own levels of different changing of the sound, regardless of the efforts you make to try to optimize it, it's going to happen anytime there's an additional link in the chain. And there were 27, 26 people during this group sound meditation. And then at the end, we had time to talk about it. And the experience people were having, it blew me away because, some of them didn't have headphones. Some of them only had like the speaker aspect of their cell device, not even earbuds or anything like that. I to this day will never forget that moment. And my sense now is that as long as my intention is there, that this creative energy will move through any and every and all devices as best as it can to support that individual, so be it. Because I can't control those certain things to optimize, let's say the higher fidelity compositions. And I feel more than ever that it's less about that and more about setting that intention, doing the best I can to create the cleanest, nicest possible product, and know that it has less to do about that, in my honest opinion, than it does about holding that sacred space and being clear on the intention that you are infusing with those sounds.
Well, dude, Carlos, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, man. This was a fantastic conversation, man. I really enjoyed this.
Me too. My pleasure. Lots of fun and very grateful for the opportunity, for the time to just hang, to just be. Much appreciated.
Oh, thanks, man. And now to everybody, hopefully you guys enjoyed that, and I'll see you on the next one. I love you. Bye.